I've seen so many people get their stuff repossessed, and it's really, really hard to watch because some of the people were really good characters and you wanted to see them do well. When I first started working on cars, I made a lot of mistakes, just like anyone else would. At the time, I thought that it felt a lot like just putting Legos together. It wasn't intentional, but as I was watching more and more videos in the niche, I just gained an overall better understanding of how cars really work. So the very next thing I did was start looking for places hiring. I was scrolling through Indeed, and eventually I came across several listings that I liked, but only one of them reached back out to me. It was a car dealership for Chrysler. Now, Chrysler worked on Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram vehicles, so there was a large selection of vehicles that I was going to end up working on. What actually ended up happening is they hired me on as a porter, which is just someone who drives vehicles. What this meant was that I saw a lot of vehicles in a lot of different conditions. I spent close to a year just porting cars. I knew that porting cars was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my time. So the day finally comes where I can't take it anymore. I'm so tired of porting cars, and the position was one where when it was slow, instead of porting cars and things like that, they would have me do all the grunt work. So I sat down and had a meeting with the service manager. As I sat down with the service manager at the time, I told him that I wanted to make more money and that I knew I had the knowledge and skill set to work on some of these cars. I didn't expect to know everything, but I thought that under some good tutelage, I could do really, really well. And with a couple of the older technicians vouching for me, they actually gave me a chance. Now, I knew I wasn't ready for the main shop, and Chrysler actually has some training that you have to do before you're allowed to work on their vehicles. But all of this was training that I could very easily do at work. These were all online videos with little quizzes at the end, but they were tied to my name, and I was finally receiving some form of formal training. Now, don't get me wrong, this training is a joke, but what they ended up doing for me was throwing me into the quick lube section of the dealership. This dealership was large enough that it could be split separately from mainline techs. So now I'm in a position where I need a toolbox. So I run down to Harbor Freight, buy the cheapest roll card I can, and put it together, throw it in the car, and next day I'm at work with my very own toolbox. I brought all of the tools that I had from home, threw them in the toolbox, and I was ready. Now, this part of the story is not very interesting because the only thing that I did was change oil and do my test. During these few weeks, I spent every moment that I had doing as much of the training as I could and absorbing as much as I could. There was nothing that stopped me from progressing further in training, so that's exactly what I did. I went through every single category: body and chassis, electrical, noise and vibration. Hybrid electrical was something that was new and coming out at the time. Transmission, engine, and just every category that I could. I was taking the classes that didn't require traveling and not just clicking through them, so that when I stepped up, I was ready. Now, fortunately, I had made some friends in the back shop from my year porting that were really, really supportive and helped me get to the next step quicker. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of learning you can do when all you're doing is changing oil, rotating tires, and replacing them. But that didn't matter to me. I knew that I wanted to get better at this, so that's what I did. I continued the schooling, and finally I reached what is known as level 1, which is Chrysler's baseline warranty certified technician. What this means is that I was now allowed to do basic warranty claims on vehicles. And without getting into it too much, this is what was required by the dealership to move to the back. They didn't do any further testing, and to people's knowledge, it was if you are level 1 and we have space, you can go be a mainline tech. And while I don't think this is a great system, it worked out for me. So one day I come in and all of my stuff is gone. I'm looking for my box. I'm thinking people are pulling a prank on me, and I hear that I'm needed back in the office, and that's never a good feeling. So I'm walking into the office. I'm nervous as I can be. because I'm like, man, they moved all my stuff, I'm getting fired, I did something wrong. What actually had happened is they had been deciding over the past couple weeks whether or not they wanted to move me. Now, my understanding was that the next progression for most people at the shop was to go to the used car department, do some learning over there, and then move to the back, but they were not having that for me. I was moved straight to the back and just dropped in the deep end. They didn't give me any warning. I had no idea it was coming, but they had moved my stuff to the back and had already hired somebody else to take my place in Express or Quick Lube. Now, coming into this news, I was basically shitting myself. I was so nervous. I was not ready for this at all. I didn't feel like I was prepared. I thought that maybe I would have a couple days heads up. I would talk about it, tell them when I was ready to go back there, but they had better plans for me. So I then spent the next 6 years in the back shop, learning as much as I could, embracing and just absorbing all of the techniques. For the last 3 years of my time there, I actually became a assistant team leader. All that meant was that if people had questions, they would come ask me. And my responsibilities, all in all, didn't actually change that much. But over that time and those 7 years, I noticed that the turnover rate at the dealership was atrocious. And research has shown me that that's actually the case in a lot of dealerships. Back when I was in Quick Lube, I had the little Harbor Freight roll cart, which I still have and use to this day, and that was it. But I remember seeing people with $15,000 Snap-on boxes full of tools, all sorts of things I didn't even know what they were, and it was just kind of surreal because I couldn't understand why someone who's doing such basic tasks thought that they needed $15,000 plus in tools. And if you're not familiar with how tool trucks work, most people go into short-term or potentially long-term debt to purchase them. It was really kind of unfortunate to see that many people throwing away that much money for a career they might not stick with. So what ended up being the most common cause for turnover among new people was that they spent more time buying good tools than setting a good foundation. You do not need fancy power tools. You do not need a $15,000, $10,000, $5,000 toolbox. I have in total spent less than $1,000 on toolboxes across my career. I spent maybe $200 to $300 on the Harbor Freight toolbox, and then probably 4 years later spent $500 on a used one that came with tools inside of it. And I've been using that same toolbox since. So what would happen is people would get these expensive toolboxes, and then they would find out that, hey, I'm not making enough money to pay for this. So they would then rush through their training, not paying any attention to actually learning, and just rush to get to the back. And this is where I say it's the fault of the dealer, partially because they would allow it. They would allow people to move to a flat rate position where you're only paid for the work that's done and not for your time being there. So unfortunately, the most common thing is that people would get $10,000 plus in debt for tools, thinking that it was going to make them better. And then when they got back to doing mainline work, they found out that, hey, this is hard. I need to understand what's going on. And a lot of them didn't. And sometimes people were actually making less than when they were getting paid by the hour to just change oil. And with the way that this dealership was structured, once you moved up, your previous spot was usually filled. So if for whatever reason you needed to step back down, there wasn't usually an available spot for you. You might get bounced around to different departments and pushed all over the place, but the reality was that you were in a replaceable position now, and that's often what happened. So people would leave the dealership with giant toolboxes and tools and a tremendous amount of debt. I've seen so many people get their stuff repossessed, and it's really, really hard to watch because some of the people were really good characters and you wanted to see them do well, but they put themselves in a position where that was just not the outcome that was going to happen. So if I had one piece of advice to pass on to anyone who's looking to work on cars, whether it's at home in your garage, project cars, or maybe you're looking to make it into a career, please do yourself a favor and educate yourself as much as you can on the actual systems that cars use to operate. Liking cars isn't enough. You will burn out from that. So please do yourself a favor and only upgrade as needed. Don't buy tools that you don't need. Snap-on does not make you a better technician. It does not make you work on cars better. So go outside, find a project car, tinker with it and break it. Put it into 1,000 pieces and do your best to get it back together. And you just keep doing that until you can finally get grasp of what's actually going on. If you have the opportunity to get a mentor, I think it's a fantastic idea. It was the primary reason that I was able to be as successful as I was. And I really don't want to see anybody else struggle. Keep it small, learn as much as you can, and just avoid the unnecessary. Learning is what makes you successful. Learning in life is where I believe that most of the joy of life comes from. And I think that applies outside of working on cars. So I guess what I'm really trying to get at is that if you have something that you really want to do, the barrier to entry is only as big as you make it. If you take the opportunity to access the resources that you have, including the internet, and in today's day and age, using AI to help you out with things like that, there's almost nothing that you can't do. You don't need to start with the fanciest equipment or all the tools. You don't need to know everything about what it is that you're trying to get into. You just have to have the desire and will to learn. And with those two things, there's almost nothing in the world that you can't do. So I appreciate you guys sticking it through this long and listening to a little bit of my story, but also just some advice that I have for anybody that may be looking to get into working on cars. I wish you all the very best, and I will see you next time.